Hey there, I'm Permanent DM, the creator of the game All Mice Die, and today I wanted an easy, simple, non-controversial topic, so let's talk about fudging. Do you fudge at the table? Is the tabletop version of, do you want to take this conversation outside? Things are about to get animated. One of the reasons it's such a controversial conversation is that it's an unwritten rule, right? Well, actually, the 5th edition DMG has a section on this. It's page 235. Rolling behind the screens lets you fudge the results if you want to. If 2 critical hits in a row would kill a character, you can change the second critical hit into a hit, or even a miss. Don't distort the rules too often, though, and don't let your players know you're doing it. Otherwise, they might think they don't face any real risks, or at worst, you're playing favorites. Later, on page 237, it adds another comment which helps to shed some light on the mentality. Remember that dice don't run your game. You do. The dice are like rules. They're tools to help keep the action moving. There it is. The rule's written, case closed. We all know exactly what to do. Except, as any TTRPG player knows, we can nitpick and argue over a given rule or word forever. I've actually been in the orbit of a 15-year-old argument over the word attack. I'm looking at you, D&D 4th edition. Even if we agree on what it means, is it a good idea to do it like this? Well, there's 2 ways to answer this, and I think the first one is more important to the hobby overall, so let's tackle that one first. The first is, should we be having this question? When we actually ask the question, people who are on the side of fudging rolls are bothered by kind of 2 big important pieces. The first is that it feels like if we are rolling the dice, we should be good with the outcome either way. If we aren't okay with it either way, then rolling is just doing it to hear the sound that they make against the table, and that's against the spirit of the game, having dice in the first place. The second is that telling your players you aren't doing something that you are doing feels like I'm just lying to my friends. That quote on 237 takes a stance on problem 1, and don't let them know that you're doing it is basically their answer to question 2. But is this really the right way to address this problem? We can argue forever, and we have, about whether it is good advice. But I think the better question is whether this is the best way to address this issue for the overall community. What if instead of trying to find the right answer for every group, we rephrase the problem as a question to ask your group? What if, at the start of the campaign, we ask our players what their opinions are about that quote from 237? It's in one of the books that potentially your players should have access to, especially if you want them to DM someday. You can say, are you okay if I change once in a while the result of a die because of terrible luck? Or it's going to help make things more dramatic. What gets lost here if we approach it this way? For some players, they feel like they might lose the magic of the game, but I would propose that demystifying the role of the DM is actually really helpful for the hobby overall. If it isn't, I think Matt Colville might be public enemy number 1. DMs might say, well, what if I need to use that tool? What if I make a mistake and I need to correct things on the fly? There are many people, including Colville himself, that says that design doesn't stop just because the session started. And I might need those tools and might need to be able to fake it. To them, I would say, as a community, being honest with your players, with people who are likely your friends, is probably just going to be better for the hobby overall. Your players should know that you too are human. The second topic is why I don't fudge rolls as a default in my game, for the reference. Firstly, this is my choice, right? And I tell my players up front how it goes. Secondly, it's just much harder to fudge rolls in All Mice Die because the DM rolls very infrequently. Players roll their attack rolls. They roll their abilities, and they roll their defenses when they get attacked. So in many cases, I only pick up the dice when something is going catastrophically wrong for the players. Usually when it's time for damage. And then I want them to see what is befalling their character. They're going to know in a second anyways when they actually write it down. Thirdly, and this is critical to how I run games in general, having the players learn and know what the numbers are for challenges and monsters is information designed to be player-facing. One player telling another player that the Westover clan warrior they fought had 19 armor class and had around 50 or 60 hit points, it isn't metagaming in my system, and I don't think we're really losing anything by people knowing those are things that exist. It's the math, it's the game we're already playing. That information and learning the world and sharing the information, it's critically important, and it's been part of the hobby since basically forever. If I fudge the numbers for health or armor or something that is in the session, I'm taking information away from the players that the system assumes that they should have. Lastly, and this is in Wes March's style in general, it means that the players don't have to overcome the challenge I set in front of them, but they have an idea of what the next part of the plot is going to be. They don't need to get through part 1 successfully to get to part 2 of the module, or if they do, they don't have to do it all in one sitting. If they all die, or if they decide to turn back, that's part of the experience, and it's not a failure state for me as a dungeon master. They might have failed in character, but we're not failing at the game. Having the conversation of, are you okay with dice just being a guide that we sometimes audit, sets an expectations between players and DMs, and here's the key. You should keep that. A lot of this game is about expectations. And a lot of the problems are when the expectations of the players and the other players at the table do not meet, or when the expectations that the DM has, like, I expect my players to keep notes and to remember what's going on, check more about that in the AAR video, that expectation doesn't get met by the players and the DM thinks that nobody cares. Or the players hear that expectation and think, man, now I've got to do homework for my fun time? You need to make sure those match, and fudging dice is no different, really. And having this conversation as part of the process, the one from page 237, it demystifies the process of DMing. It lowers the barrier of entry for players and avoids any potential bad feelings from what happens when you find out the hard way that maybe your achievements and failures weren't earned in quite the way that you thought. Over on my Patreon, there's a couple of videos that are going to be explaining stories that made me default to not fudging, and it's kind of an extra included for members. That left a bad taste in my mouth overall, and it also let me develop the table style I use today, which people seem to really enjoy. I don't want to focus too much on that here because I think we can learn the lessons without really focusing on the actual story itself. But on the Patreon side of things, they are kind of fun stories to tell, so go check that out if you're interested. Making it easier to run and harder to fudge are things that I talk about in my video Share the Load if you want to check out that as well. But that's all for today, folks. If you like what I'm doing here, go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell button. You can join me on Patreon for videos like I talked about and some extra cool stuff. My Wes March's game, All My Sty, that I talked about earlier, it's launching on Kickstarter soon. So if you want to hear about that, there's a link down below and you can keep the conversation going by joining our Discord server. Because at the end of the day, Wes March's, it's about community, but it's also about trust and being able to rely on the information we're given. So until next time, thanks for watching.